The shocking truth about the Alaskan sisters who lured miners to their bone-chilling fates. In the icy grip of Alaska's unforgiving wilderness, two sisters stood at the edge of disaster, beckoning miners into their deadly web. Eliza and May, with their hauntingly beautiful smiles and eyes that sparkled like frost under the Arctic sun, became a siren song for those seeking fortune. Word spread of their charm and the gold-laden territory that lay a mere mile from their cabin, deep within the infamously dangerous terrain where no one had ever returned unscathed. But behind their inviting facade lurked a bone-chilling truth that sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest men. The first strange element was the deep silence that cloaked their cabin. It was odd for such a bustling area. It felt like stepping into a tomb. Faint whispers rose from the shadows, tales of the missing men who had ventured into the snow only to fade from existence, leaving nothing behind but their boots, neatly aligned on the porch. The locals claimed an eerie light would flicker around the sisters' home at night, like lanterns drawing them in, or perhaps something much darker. As the miners gathered, a palpable tension crackled in the air. They were drawn in, captivated by voices sweet as honey. But buried beneath their excitement lay growing unease, anxiety prickling at their minds. What really happened to those who disappeared? A lone miner stumbled back one fateful evening, his eyes wide with terror, muttering about shadows stalking him, whispers that echoed through the trees. Just as he began to speak of his encounter, a bone-chilling scream sliced through the night, halting their breath. Their hearts raced. They were all at the mercy of whatever terror haunted that cabin. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The nights grew colder, and the whispers grew louder. The miners decided to form a pact, bound by survival, exchanging uneasy glances. But what could they do? They were entrapped by the allure of gold and the sisters' enchanting beauty. The sight of the cabin loomed larger, shadows stretching across the snowy landscape like fingers clutching for the unsuspecting. What nefarious plans did the sisters concoct? As the miners plotted their move, the heartbreaking truth hung thick in the air. Would they be the next victims to fall prey to the chilling fate that awaited them? As the moonlight flickered against the vast Alaskan expanse, secrets buried in the snow awaited their inevitable reveal. What lay beneath the surface was only the beginning. The storm raged on, a swirling tempest that piled snow high against the cabin like a fortress of white. Inside, the miners huddled together, their breaths visible in the frigid air, hearts pounding a cacophony of fear. As the wind howled, hammering against the walls, each clap was like a forewarning, echoing the torment that awaited them outside. Each man felt the crushing weight of silence settle in, broken only by the crackling fire. The shadows danced, lending an ethereal quality to the sisters' cabin, where danger lay woven into its very fabric. "We can't just sit here," one miner, Ben, said, his voice barely more than a whisper. Fear dripped from his every word, pooling around their circle like the melting snow outside. Eliza and May's lure had worked, serving as bait that drew them deeper into this nightmare. "We need to leave tonight," Ben insisted, but his determination was met with apprehensive glances. How could they face the horrors lurking in the cold when the cabin itself felt so deadly? Suddenly, the door creaked open, and in slipped May, her face rosy from the chill. "You all look pale as ghosts. Come, warm yourselves by the fire," she called, her voice honeyed yet chilling. As she stepped inside, the air seemed to warp around her, a sensation that left everyone on edge. "Where's Eliza?" another miner asked, eyeing May suspiciously. "Oh, she's just outside, taking care of things," May replied, but her smile held a darkness that made everyone's skin crawl. Tuesday night horrors, Ben thought grimly. An odd thud suddenly interrupted their fearful chatter. Then another. It sounded as if something heavy was being dragged through the snow. Hearts thudded in unison, each man exchanging wary looks. Whatever was out there, it seemed to be creeping closer. Then, just as hope began to glimmer, a blood-curdling scream pierced through the night, shattering their fragile sense of safety. They staggered to their feet, eyes darting toward the door. "What was that?" one miner croaked, voice trembling. Something deep inside Ben twisted. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was one of their own, another soul falling prey to the sisters' sinister game. May, ever so calm, urged them to stay. "Don't fret, boys. Things always seem worse in the dark." But her eyes glinted with a predatory gleam that fueled their fear. A few daring souls glanced out through a frosted window. The sight locked their throats. Shadows moved with eerie grace through the trees, water-stained boots dragging in the snow, lining a ghostly parade. The men practically jumped back, hands clutching each other's arms in desperation. "We can't stay here," Ben barked, adrenaline surging. But still, they hesitated, trapped by the siblings' spellbinding charms, even as dread wrapped tighter around their souls. Suddenly, the power in the cabin flickered, throwing them into darkness for a heartbeat. The fire sputtered weakly, flames licking wildly. In that moment, a litany of screams, echoes of despair, crashed against their minds. Then silence, an eerie, anticipatory silence. Ben took a deep breath. "It's now or never," he decided harshly, rallying his courage. "We need to confront them to find out what's really going on." As if summoned by their desperate determination, both sisters appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the snow. Eliza grinned, a glint of something feral in her eyes. "Thought you were ready to play?" she cooed softly. But the only game the miners wanted to play was survival. They were out of time, and the truth was lurking just beneath the surface. What horror would they uncover if they marched into the fray? With a collective breath, they stepped toward the sisters, hearts pounding in unison. As the threshold loomed before them, realization washed over Ben. Would they be able to escape the chilling fates that awaited them, or was it already too late? The sisters' laughter rang out, echoing through the night, as the wind howled around them. Did they have the strength to unveil the darkness enveloping them, or were they already ensnared? Only one thing was certain. Everything would change now. As the sisters loomed in the doorway, the dim light of the flickering flames illuminated their silhouettes, casting long shadows that danced like specters. Eliza's grin seemed almost unnatural, wide enough to reveal sharp teeth glinting in the firelight. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of pine and an undercurrent of something more acrid fear. "Why don't you join us?" May beckoned, her voice soothing yet laced with menace. "It's not too late to have some fun." The words hung in the air, a twisted invitation that sent chills down Ben's spine. He shook his head, his heart racing, a primal instinct screaming at him to run. "What do you want from us?" Ben's voice cracked as he forced the words out. His grip tightened on the rusted pickaxe he had instinctively grasped, knuckles turning white. The other miners hung back, fear eclipsing courage, their eyes darting around the room, searching for escape. Eliza stepped closer, her eyes narrowing in delight. "It's not what we want, dear miners. It's what you desire. Your lives could be so much richer." The words dripped with seduction, playing on their most desperate dreams. May's gaze flitted toward the window, as if anticipating more shadows creeping closer. A sudden crash echoed from outside, and they all turned, flinching at the noise. "What was that?" one of the miners muttered, teeth chattering. The howling wind swallowed his voice, but the tension was palpable, hanging thick between breaths. "It's just the wind, or perhaps something more," May replied, her tone flirtatious yet teasing, as if she knew secrets that would unravel them. "Things aren't always what they seem." Then, like a swell in the ocean, the sisters' laughter rose. It wasn't the laughter of joy, it was filled with a madness that sent a wave of nausea rolling through Ben's gut. The fire flickered again, casting the room into brief darkness, and for that split second, panic shot through everyone. When the flames reignited, One of the miners was missing from their circle. "Joe?" Ben shouted, dread pooling in his stomach. In an instant the cabin felt smaller, closing in around them. Anxiety twisted like a knife. If they were to face whatever terror stalked them, they needed to stand together. "This isn't right," Ben said, more to himself than anyone else. "We must leave together." He sidled toward the door, his heart racing, pulse roaring in his ears. But as he reached for the handle, May glided in front of him, blocking his path with a predatory look. "Where do you think you're going, sweet miner?" she taunted softly. The glow of the fire danced on her face, revealing a flicker of something twisted in her gaze. "There's so much fun to be had here." "A simple game," Eliza chimed in with a laugh that chilled Ben to the core. "But it comes with a price. You simply need to choose who will join you in the next life." The words landed like a lead weight, an unveiled threat wrapped in a bow of charm. The fire crackled ominously, matching the rising fear inside the cabin. He could feel the weight of his fellow miners' anxious stares on him. But before he could gather his thoughts, another scream pierced the storm outside, a raw desperation that sent shivers through his spine. Ben's instincts screamed for action. "We can't leave anyone behind," he shouted, turning back toward the group, determination igniting in his heart. The cabin was monstrous, but so was the storm outside. "We stick together, or you'll all end up as part of the game," May whispered darkly, her smile widening as shadows encroached upon the cabin. Just then, the fire sputtered, and the light dimmed once more. Silence fell, heavy as a grave, as they all stood poised at the edge of something unthinkable. Then, a series of soft thuds began to echo outside, the sound of something dragging closer, inching toward them, and that moment, Ben's mind raced. What exactly loomed in the storm? And who among them would be the next to face whatever waited in the frigid darkness? As the sisters exchanged knowing glances, Ben knew that soon, they'd all have to confront the truth, a truth they may not survive to tell. The thuds grew louder, a rhythmic pounding that made the wooden walls tremble. Ben's heart raced, each beat echoing in his ears like a war drum. The sisters stood unmoving, gazes fixed on the door, as anticipation danced in the air like a live wire. "Joe," he murmured, the name barely a whisper. Panic clawed at him. Where could he be? Had he? No. He shook his head violently, willing the thought away. "What's outside?" One miner whimpered, his voice quivering. It was a question that lingered, clawing its way through everyone's minds. They needed to act. They couldn't cower in the dark while whatever lurked out there drew closer. "We need to barricade the door," Ben said, his voice strict with urgency. But the sisters laughed again, a sound that dripped with sweet malice. "Eliza, darling," May cooed, taking a step back, "why don't you show them how futile that is?" Eliza tilted her head, eyes alight with dark excitement. The moment her fingers snapped, it was as if the very air shifted. The wind howled, rattling the windows and pushing against the door with a force that seemed otherworldly. It was terrifying and beautiful at once, the kind of power that suffocated hope. "Let's have some fun, shall we?" Eliza's voice was honeyed, a dangerous allure. A sudden crack sounded, unlike any resounding from the storm outside, a splinter of wood followed by a deep groan as the door rattled violently. Ben lunged forward, grabbing a heavy chair. "Get ready to push," he commanded, adrenaline flooding his veins. The miners joined him, their faces pale under the dim light. Fear tied their hearts together. But then, just like that, silence settled. The howling wind seemingly snuffed out, leaving an oppressive quiet. The sound of dragging stopped. "Are you ready?" May's voice slithered through the air, curling around them with malevolence. They couldn't move, frozen under the weight of dread. Then the door burst open, flinging against the wall as a gust of frigid air swept inside, extinguishing the flickering flames and plunging the cabin into darkness. The shadows twisted, merging with the fear around them. The miners gasped, pressing back against each other, feeling the raw panic surge. "Push," Ben shouted, thrusting the chair against the doorframe. But it was already too late. Over the threshold, Something slithered through the darkness, a shadow that didn't belong. A shape emerged, draped in tattered remnants of fabric, its eyes glowing like embers in the night. As it fully unfurled, a grotesque grin stretched across its face, one that echoed Eliza's twisted smile. The stench of decay wafted through the cabin, a sickening reminder of the unspeakable horror that had followed them. "Welcome to our game," the figure crooned, its voice like gravel scraping over bones. Ben's blood ran cold. He had heard tales of creatures from the old legends, wraiths that fed on fear and despair. His legs felt heavy, the urge to flee battling with an instinct to stand firm. He couldn't do this alone. "We need to leave. Now," he barked, rallying the miners, their faces painted in fear. They scrambled backwards, trying to block the horror inching closer, gripping weapons, ready to fight for their lives. But as panic rose, the sisters laughed, an unsettling symphony blending with the chaos of their terror. "But who shall be sacrificed?" May sang, her voice light as air, as if they were merely playing a game on a summer's day. Just when he thought they had no chance, a whisper reached Ben, resonating deep in his gut. "Don't look back, just move." And with that, he led the charge into the darkness, pushing past the sisters and the figure, their laughter chasing him like demons in the night. But what would they find once they escaped? Was the storm the true nightmare? Or had they unwittingly walked into something even worse? Questions clung to him like the chill of the air. Each step felt like a final gamble, a choice made in desperation. And as they broke into the cold, swirling chaos outside, a chilling question lingered in the back of his mind. Could they outrun the darkness, or would it follow them into the night? The wind whipped around them like a living thing, slashing at their faces and limbs as they plunged into the frigid night. The smell of decay still clung to them, an inescapable reminder of what lurked behind. Panic surged as they stumbled over rocks and scrub, their hearts racing, minds dizzy with terror. "Keep running," Ben yelled, his voice hoarse against the storm's howl. He could hear the others gasping behind him, their footsteps a chaotic rhythm against the ground. "Where are we going?" shouted a miner, his breath a cloud of desperation. "Anywhere but here," Ben barked. The night was thick, wrapping around them like a suffocating blanket. Suddenly, a piercing wail cut through the wind, a sound so chilling it froze them all in their tracks. They whirled around, scanning the darkness for signs of pursuit. But all they could see were shadows dancing under the flickering moonlight. "Did you hear that?" another miner whispered, eyes wide with panic. Ben nodded, his throat tight. "We can't stop. Move." They scrambled onward, the ground beneath them uneven and treacherous. Each twist and turn through the trees felt like a game of chance, the wrong step leading to a deadly fall. But it wasn't just the terrain that threatened them. Out there, in the dark, he felt the weight of unseen eyes watching, waiting, behind them. The sisters' laughter echoed, a haunting melody that dripped with malice. "They'll never escape." Eunomia's voice floated through the air, curling around them, laced with an unsettling promise. "Not from what we've unleashed." Ben felt icy fingers crawl up his spine. "They're toying with us," he hissed. "We have to get to the mine." It was their only chance, their last shred of hope. If they reached the shafts, they could barricade the entrance and regroup. But shadows moved quicker than he could have imagined. The howling wind was suddenly pierced by a chilling shriek again, so close it reverberated in his bones. It clawed at the edges of his sanity, pushing him toward fear's brink. "Run!" he urged them louder, his voice now a raw shout. The group surged ahead, muscles burning, fear driving them forward. Then, a shadow drifted past, too fast and too real. It was near close enough for Ben to hear the sound of scraping nails against wood. Closer than he dared to believe. The earth trembled beneath their feet as the darkness throbbed. A flash of movement, and the wraith materialized, a blur of fabric and flickering eyes darting between trees, a grotesque parody of a human form. "Yes, gaining on us," shouted one miner, stumbling and falling. Ben's heart dropped as he turned to help, but dread seized him. They were running out of time. "Leave him. We have to keep moving," Ben urged, almost tearing himself away from the man who now writhed in the dirt. The cries of more wraith-like figures echoed behind them. His breath was ragged, each intake laced with fear. They rounded a bend, and there it stood, the entrance to the mine, a gaping maw of darkness. The flickering light from ahead seemed like an oasis amid the chaos. "Get inside," Ben shouted, bulldozing his way toward the yawning opening. The others followed, the sound of their hurried steps muffled by the screams behind. But as they entered, the air thickened. The mine was dark, deeper than they remembered, stretching into an abyss of shadows. They stumbled further in, desperate to escape. Just then, heavy footsteps echoed around them and the ground beneath their feet shuddered, as if responding to the sinister call of the sisters. The darkness around them pulsed, alive with the whispers of ancient secrets. And then came the echo of laughter again, sweeter and more enticing than before. "You think you can hide? You're already part of our game." Ben's stomach dropped. What had they awakened down there? Tension crackled through the air as he turned to face his companions, eyes wide with uncertainty. What are we supposed to do now? Suddenly, a low growl rumbled from the depths of the mine, an unholy sound that sent ice through his veins. There would be no safety in the shadows, no refuge from the unseen horrors lurking just beyond reach. The question loomed heavy over them, the potential for fear hanging like a noose. Would they survive what awaited them in the dark? Or had they just stepped deeper into the sisters' twisted world of nightmares? The air was thick with dread, every breath they took intensifying the overwhelming sense of impending doom. Ben squinted into the shadows, straining to hear over the chaos in his mind. The growl reverberated again, closer this time. Each sound ricocheted off the walls, creating an unsettling cacophony that spoke of the horrors that lay in wait. "Where do we go?" a miner gasped, eyes darting nervously around. "Keep moving," Ben barked again, forcing himself to sound stronger than he felt. "We need to find a safe spot, something to barricade ourselves with." The mine twisted inward, tunnels branching off at odd angles, each one a potential escape or a deeper trap. They stumbled down the main shaft, a flicker of light from a distant lantern revealing more rock than comfort. Suddenly, flickering silhouettes danced beyond the meager light. His heart raced at the sight. A figure, gaunt and twisted, darted into the shadows. Was it one of the sisters? Or something worse? "Did you see that?" someone murmured, their voice barely a whisper. "It doesn't matter," Ben replied, urgency surging through him, propelling him forward. "We can't stop." Just as they turned a corner, the ground trembled violently beneath their feet. A deafening crash echoed from behind them, and the sound of stones splitting filled the air. Ben's gut twisted. Had the entity following them caused a cave-in? "Run!" he yelled again, adrenaline flooding his veins. They sprinted, dodging falling rocks, fear lending them speed. "Where's Carl?" one of the miners panted, suddenly missing from the group. "No time," Ben shouted back, desperate. "Just focus on getting out alive." Another gust of wind raged through the passage, cold and biting, like the promise of death itself. With every breath, he could taste the metallic tang of fear. Ahead, distorted whispers filled the air, snaking their way into his mind. "Did you come to play?" a voice rang out, laced with that sinister laughter. It echoed around them, warping through the mine like some nightmarish symphony. He knew that laugh. "My!" he spat through clenched teeth, dread pooling in his gut. They had brought this upon themselves. In their greed for gold, they had awakened something far darker. The tunnel forked again, but Ben hesitated, his gut instinct screaming for him to keep moving forward. He glanced back. Not everyone had made it past the collapse. He steeled himself, gripping the nearest object he could find, a rusted pickaxe someone had dropped in their frenzy. "It's down to us now," he whispered. "We have to make a stand." But doubt washed over him. They were no match for the creatures that haunted these mines. They pressed on, the whispers growing louder, swirling around them like smoke, intoxicating and maddening. Ben stopped abruptly, a sudden thought striking him. He turned to the group, all wide-eyed and frantic. "What if we face them together?" What if they think we're stronger? The murmurs rose in a fever pitch, confusion blending with a desperate hope. What if we're just feeding their game? Another miner said, fear creeping into his voice. Ben felt the weight of their choices hang over them, thick and suffocating. We have to fight. We owe it to ourselves. To Carl and the others. Before he could dwell on that haunting thought, the growl returned, deeper and more guttural. The darkness seemed to pulse around them. Suddenly, from the shadows, a figure lunged, long limbs, starkly pale against the mine's deep tones. Get back. Ben swung the pickaxe wildly. They would not go down without a fight. The creature stumbled, momentarily disoriented, just enough for the group to clamber back in a panic. But as the dust settled, something else became clear. A second wraith broke free from the shadows, no less ominous, grinning with manic glee. Your screams are music to our ears. The laughter that followed was a chorus of 1,000 twisted souls, enveloping them, drowning out rational thought. As the figures advanced, Ben felt a gripping moment of clarity. Was this their end, or were they standing on the precipice of something far more sinister? Terror clawed at his throat as he realized the deeper they ventured into the mine, the more the lines between predator and prey blurred. What if the price of survival meant becoming part of their terrible game? The air clung to them like a heavy fog, thick with fear and the smell of damp earth. Ben's grip tightened around the pickaxe, knuckles white as he faced the emerging horrors. The laughter twisted through the mine, maddening and sharp, a relentless reminder of the darkness they all faced. Stay together, he shouted, but his voice barely reached the trembling miners around him. They were losing hope, and he could see it in their eyes. The flicker of courage was fading fast. The first creature advanced with an unnatural grace, its long limbs gliding through the shadows, while the second, its face, a ghastly grin, seemed almost buoyant with twisted delight as it crept closer. Ben felt a wave of nausea wash over him. Fight back, he urged, raising the pickaxe high, but the miners hesitated, fear paralyzing them. One of the miners, a young man named Jimmy, finally mustered his voice. What do we do? They're not real. His disbelief shattered under the weight of their situation. They can't be. They're as real as the mistakes we made. Ben yelled. Get ready. Fight. Before he could finish, the first wraith lunged. Ben swung the pickaxe, its blade cutting through the air, and found traction in flesh. A ghastly shriek split the dimness, the sound raw and choked, reverberating like an echo of their own regret. The monster tumbled back, momentarily stunned. See? We can hurt them, Ben encouraged, adrenaline surging as he turned toward the others. But desperation was giving way to chaos. The miners were breaking apart, fear driving them to flee deeper into the bowels of the mine. Was it a strategy or utter panic? Stick together, he hollered again, but it was too late. The group splintered, everyone looking for the safest path. As he scanned the shadows for any sign of the others, Ben felt a tug at his heart. My! He yelled, knowing full well she was beyond reach now, likely feeding on whatever dark desires had awoken in this place. With one wild glance down the tunnel, his breath caught. There were more figures now, emerging from the depths, each one more grotesque than the last, twisted forms that seemed to pulse with shadows, their eyes like burning coals. This way, he urged, leading a few miners harder against their instincts, deeper into the tunnel, where the whispers grew sharper and blended into one soul-sucking chorus, magnificent yet terrifying. But as they moved, the ground shifted beneath their feet again. Rocks slipped, the air crackled with electricity. Suddenly, a blinding light shot from behind them. Had they set off something? Ben turned just as the mine flared to life, shadows ricocheting off the slick walls. Run! A miner screamed, a sudden panic igniting another rush of energy. They stumbled back, confusion mixing with raw fear. Ben realized their only chance was to face the emerging chaos head-on. We need to light the path, he shouted, scrambling toward the old lanterns lining the walls. If they could just ignite the old flames, maybe they could hold the darkness at bay. The miners hesitated, eyes wide and glistening, but as one they fumbled for flint and tinder. A briquette sparked, sending flickers of flame dancing into the air. The creatures halted, swaying as if caught between two worlds, the shadows on one side and the fragile flicker of warmth on the other. "It's working," a voice cried out, hope igniting amongst the miners. But Ben knew it wouldn't last. They needed more than light, they needed to escape this nightmare. Yet just as the fire gained strength, the earth shook violently beneath them, a rumble that seemed to awaken something ancient. The creature's grin twisted into rage, eyes cast on the newly lit path. "What will you do, miners? Run away?" Taunted, a chuckle spilling like poison. "You can't leave. Not now that you're part of our story." Ben felt a chill creep up his spine. What had they awakened? With the ground trembling, he dared to wonder. Would the flames be enough to guide them out? Or had they merely trapped themselves now, deeper in the game than they had ever imagined? The time for questions had passed. Shouting, they rushed forward. But the darkness continued to loom, eager to devour. Would they embrace the light, or would the shadows bring them to their knees? Adventure beckoned, but danger lurked around every corner. What awaited them just beyond the threshold of the flame? The heat from the lantern flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows that danced like phantoms around them. Ben's heart raced as he urged the miners forward, but fear still clutched their throats. "Stay tight," he commanded, desperation spilling from his voice. Just ahead, 3 miners stumbled, their faces pale as they pointed to a jagged opening in the rock. "What's that?" one of them gasped, the tremor in his voice punctuating the dread pooling in the air. Ben squinted into the dark crevice. An odd glimmer reflected the lantern's light, and for one fleeting moment, hope sparked anew. "We need to check it out. Maybe it leads somewhere safe." As they edged closer, an eerie wind emerged from the opening, carrying with it faint whispers that threaded through the darkness. Join us, what the hell is that?" Jimmy's voice cracked, his eyes darting as if expecting the monsters to snatch them from the shadows. "Focus," Ben snapped. "We get out through there." Moving forward, the ground trembled again, more violently this time as tendrils of darkness reached out from the crevice. The creatures lunged again, their forms crawling from the deep, twisting and contorting into something grotesque. Long claws scraped against the stone, the sound sharp as a knife. "Back!" Ben shouted. He swung the pickaxe instinctively, but this time he felt its weight shift, as if burdened by the evil that surrounded them. Each swing felt futile against the wall of darkness pressing in. Suddenly, a howl tore through the mine, chilling them to the bone. The miners looked to Ben, questions swirling in their frantic eyes. "Light the way," he screamed, desperation creeping into his tone. "We have to keep the fire, keep it alive." But before they could react, the creatures bared their fangs, unveiling a world of jagged teeth formed from the very earth they cherished. A wave of icy breath whipped through the mine, extinguishing the flames in a heartbeat. Darkness plunged them into a grip so tight they couldn't scream. "No, light," Ben panted, scrambling to get the lantern back. The pitiful spark faded, leaving them in the thick of shadows that echoed with frantic whispers. Panic ignited flames of self-preservation. "Run!" someone bellowed, bolting toward the jagged opening Ben had seen moments before. Chaos erupted as the miners surged, a stampede of terror, each man fighting for survival over camaraderie. "Stay together," Ben roared, but his voice was suffocated in the clamor, swept away like the light of their lantern. As they charged forward, Ben felt an icy grip clasp his ankle. He stumbled, falling against the jagged floor, the shock surging up his spine. He twisted around, ready to swing, but found only silence where there should have been a creature. The darkness grew thicker, and shadows swirled like vultures circling their prey. Then he saw it. One of the miners, a stout man named Hank, was racing toward the opening, feet scrambling to stay beneath him. "Help! They're coming!" Ben's heart raced as the shadows behind Hank morphed into a whirlwind of pitch black, all-consuming. Ben shot forward, grabbing Hank's arm just as it slipped past the threshold. "Hurry, get in!" With one effort, they tumbled through, crashing into what felt like a great void. Landing hard on the cold ground, Ben gasped, wheels of the mind adjusting to the dimness. As he pushed himself up, dread chilled his very bones. A snarling chorus echoed beyond the crevice. The light from their lantern flickered uncertainly just outside. Where are we? Hank's voice trembled, suddenly lost in the veils of shadows creeping at the edges. The cavern was vast, its walls alive with intricate carvings that twisted and warped as if the rock itself lamented their presence. Ben squinted, feeling the weight of dread settle on his shoulders. Those carvings told a story, a tale too haunting to comprehend, one that could devour men whole. In the distance, they heard laughter bright and mocking, a reminder of the darkness they had barely escaped. "What is happening?" Hank whispered, fear rippling through his voice. "We have to find a way out," Ben rasped, though doubt gnawed at his spirit. Just then, a low growl echoed through the cave, a sound so close it made his skin crawl. His heart thudded in his chest, agony twisting through him. Did they truly escape the horrors? Or were they simply moving from one nightmare into another? Hope had dimmed nearly to blackness. With each moment, the cave seemed to fade, the shadowy forms slinking closer. "What will they do to us?" Hank whispered, the gravity of their fate clawing at their sanity. Ben's breath came shallow, realization crashing over him like waves against a stubborn rock. They thought the mine had surrendered its secrets, but it felt like the beginning of something unfathomably worse. He looked past the entrance. The silhouettes waited, hungry for a chance. Would they take a stand here, or would they succumb to the unknown forces that beckoned from the dark? Time was running out. What awaited them as they ventured deeper into the terrifying embrace of this bizarre new realm? The growl slithered through the air, wrapping around Ben and Hank like a noose. Ben's instincts screamed at him to run, but he stood frozen, scanning their surroundings. The cave air was thick, humid, with a musty scent that clawed at his throat. "Stay close," he hissed, pulling Hank deeper into the shadows while desperately trying to hush the quaking in his voice. The laughter continued, mocking them. It felt alive, echoing from everywhere and nowhere, reverberating until it scratched at the inside of his skull. Hank's eyes were wide, a haunted look taking over his face. "We can't just stand here. They're out there." Ben's heart raced as he felt the tremors beneath their feet. Something was coming. All at once, shadows erupted around them, writhing and morphing like smoke driven by a terrible storm. An abominable form coalesced just out of reach, a grotesque figure with eyes glimmering like wet stones. Panic surged through him, igniting a primal urge to survive. "Move!" Ben shouted, and with that, they bolted further into the cave, hearts pounding rhythmically against the onslaught of fear. Every heartbeat echoed like a war drum urging them forward as they ran, stumbling over uneven ground. "Where do we even go?" Hank panted, desperation clawing at his throat. "This place is a graveyard." "I don't know," Ben shouted back, sweat stinging his eyes. "But I'm not dying here." The laughter grew louder, escalating into howls that danced through the cave like a consuming fire. Suddenly, they stumbled into a chamber, its ceiling stretching like the maw of some ancient beast. The carvings on the walls glinted as they passed, revealing glimpses of ancient figures, a lineage of miners, twisted and trapped in a loop of despair. Their faces, surrounded by shades of wrath and loss, were eternally screaming. Each carving seemed to tell a story of betrayal, perhaps those who once excavated the mine, only to find themselves ensnared. With horror creeping in, Ben could feel that same grip tightening around him, sapping at his resolve. "Ben!" Hank's scream interrupted his thoughts as he turned to see horrors materializing at the chamber's mouth. Dark figures slipped in, their forms shifting and blending into each other, creating one mass of malevolence, a black tide swelling against their retreat. "What are they?" Hank cried, stepping backward, a wild fear gripping him. "What do they want?" "Maybe they want what they lost," Ben murmured, eyes darting for an escape. For a moment, dread blocked out all logic. He caught a glimmer of hope, a narrow tunnel branching off to the side, shadowed but promising. We could try there. The shadows surged forward, shrieking with rage, and Ben felt the urgency propel him. Go. Now. With a swift shove, they darted toward the tunnel. Felt like pushing through a wall of ice. They squeezed into the small passage, ducking low as the darkness clawed at their backs. The tunnel twisted and turned, closing in like the jaws of a giant beast. But Ben pressed onward, his thoughts consumed by the need to escape. Each step echoed with a thud against the damp stone. They couldn't stop. Hesitation was death. Suddenly, Hank halted. What's happening here? Why does it feel like... His voice faltered, brow furrowing. Don't. Ben snapped, adrenaline fueling his urgency. Just keep moving. A howl erupted from behind, a guttural roar that sent chills radiating down Ben's spine. The tunnel trembled, looming darkness closing in as if it had life. Then he saw it at the edge of his vision, something gleaming amidst the darkness. It was a pair of eyes, cold and unfeeling, staring into his soul. Go! He screamed, lunging forward, dragging Hank with him. They surged deeper, heart racing, as the predator closed in behind. The passage narrowed further. Just ahead, a flicker of light beckoned them. Hope surged again, and in that flicker, he thought he could momentarily see beyond the veil of despair. But this flickering hope flickered too rapidly, like a dying breath. What's up ahead? Hank gasped, breaking their momentum, fear choking his voice. Ben dared a glance back, dread pooling in his gut as he saw the shadows pooling, forming into something massive and wretched. The figures, now almost humanoid, moved with purpose, darkness swirling around them like a cloak. Keep going, Ben shouted, and with one last effort, they plunged into the light, praying it wasn't another trap waiting to ensnare them. But just then, a deafening clamor erupted, drowning their steps as darkness swallowed them once more. What lay ahead in this flickering light? More answers or the final grasp of the shadows? They stumbled forward, the flicker of light growing brighter, emerging from the depths like a beacon. It pulsed, illuminating the jagged walls of the cave, casting twisted reflections that mocked their fear. Ben pushed on, adrenaline fueling every step, dragging Hank behind him despite the weight of terror creeping back in as they broke into the small chamber beyond the narrowing tunnel. They found themselves in a hidden alcove, its walls inscribed with illuminated symbols outlining the history of the place, a tale of greed, betrayal, and cyclical doom. But the glow felt treacherous, every flickering beam pointing out their vulnerability. The shadows behind them shifted, gathering strength. Is this it? Hank stammered, fear lacing his words as the pool of light dimmed ever so slightly. Ben scanned the small room, his heart pounding. It has to be safe. There's a door. Up against the far wall, a wooden door lay hidden behind a tangle of roots, moss clinging desperately to its frame. The scratches around it suggested it hadn't been opened in ages, but it was their only chance. Help me with it. They rushed over, pushing against the door together. It creaked audibly, the sound echoing like a death knell in the quiet chamber. With one final effort, they shoved it open. Dust clouds spiraled into the air, and the smell of old earth filled their lungs. Quick, Ben urged, hurrying through the threshold. Hank followed cautiously, casting a look back at the darkening shadows swelling at the mouth of the tunnel. Closing the heavy door behind them, they braced against it, hearts racing, breaths coming in heavy gasps. The moment the door shut, the oppressive weight of the darkness fell away, revealing a new world vast, open, and shimmering with a light that felt alive. They stood at the edge of a seemingly endless expanse of white, a fresh field of snow under a dazzling sky. The bitter cold bit at their faces, a stark reminder they were still in the wilds of Alaska. But something dug deep in Ben's gut. The escape came at a cost. What just happened? His mind raced. They had fled from one nightmare into another reality, and yet this felt wrong. Suddenly, a howling wind spiraled up from behind the door. It rattled as shadows clawed at the edges. The sisters' laughter echoed, taunting, triumphant. You think you've escaped? The teasing bellows sent icy shivers through Ben. Desperation surged. We can't let this be the end. We have to fight. He turned and charged toward the door, desperation swirling inside him. But as he reached for the handle, Hank grabbed his arm. Ben, we can't go back. We can't win against them. No. Ben's voice cut through the air, raw with determination. We can't let them win. We have to face them, whatever it takes. Panic brewed inside him as he glanced at their surroundings. Enlightened by fear, he picked up a jagged piece of ice, feeling its edge as he turned back to Hank. Help me. Together we can make one last stand for the others. Before Hank could respond, the door shuddered, the dark figures outside pressing with relentless energy. Shadows slipped beneath the door, pooling foot by foot. The sisters' distorted faces loomed, twisting into demonic grins. Ben felt dread swell within him. They want our fear, we give them nothing. With that, he flung the door open wide. Light flooded the space, blinding them momentarily, and the cold air rushed in, invigorating. Face us, Ben shouted into the void, throwing the piece of ice into the fray. For a heartbeat, silence fell, and shadows receded, eyes narrowing at the bright light they both stood in. Their fear twisted, slowly wavering under the unyielding resolve. Then, like shadows lifting with dawn, the sisters retreated from the glaring brightness, their shrieks an unholy chorus. You think you can resist? You're already trapped in our game. At that moment, realization struck Ben. The darkness didn't hold power, they gave it power. Do you hear them, Hank? They're scared. Strength pulsed through him. This world, we can beat them. Focus on the light and hold on to the hope. With renewed energy, they charged forward, light bioluminescent in their hands, blind fear replaced by a fierce fire of survival as they stepped outside into the cold. The clear air pricked at their skin, awakening every sense until they were alive again. Shadows swirled behind, still trying to creep against the light, desperate to maintain their grasp. But this time Ben didn't back down. Their last stand against the sisters' shadows ignited. With every ounce of strength, he and Hank pushed towards the heart of the oncoming dark, a unified force against despair. We're not your game, he shouted, and under the brightening sky, they were no longer just miners, they were warriors of their own fate. The air crackled, light and darkness clashed violently, and then, with one final roar of defiance, the shadows recoiled, shrinking back into nothing, leaving behind only a warm silence. They're gone, Hank muttered, stunned. As they stood on that snowy precipice, breathing heavy yet liberated, hope surged. Behind them, the cabin loomed as a hollow shell, no longer a prison. They would carry this light forward, because they had survived. And as dawn's first rays spread across the horizon, illuminating the horrors that had come before, Ben felt a deep warmth in his heart. We faced our fears together, he whispered, knowing that the scars would remain but would serve as a reminder of their resilience and the flicker of hope they had ignited in the chilling dark. With one last glance into the desolate expanse of the mine, they turned to face their future, the echoes of laughter fading, nothing but their courage ringing loud against the lingering shadows. They had triumphed, and nothing would ever be the same. As they forged ahead into the sunlit snow, Ben smiled, the dawning realization that truly, survival was a game worth winning. And just like that, their story became a warning, a fragile tale against the dark and a promise of renewal as they walked into the welcoming arms of life once more. But hear us where you come in. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss our next exclusive stories that dive even deeper into the unknown. Smash that like button right now, it feeds the algorithm. And your support means the world. Flood the comments section below, sharing your thoughts, reactions, and theories about this wild ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this conclusion too. This is the moment to show your support for what we do.